Hello lovers, Eleanor here. Tonight we will embark on a journey that blends the quiet ache of daily life with the echoes of history. This evening, I find myself sitting by my window, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the yellowed pages of an old map I recently uncovered. The map shows my neighborhood as it was decades ago, streets barely paved, little squares for gatherings, and tiny marks that I imagine were the first homes here. It makes me both nostalgic and a little startled, thinking about how quickly the world changes, and how the places we inhabit carry layers of memories, some joyous, some bittersweet. If you enjoy these journeys through time, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Earlier today, I received a notice about an upcoming community day in our neighborhood. At first glance, it might seem like a simple local event, games, food stalls, maybe some live music, but for me, it stirred a cocktail of emotions. Excitement mixed with a subtle nervousness. Meeting new people, or even encountering familiar faces after months of isolation, can be both thrilling and unsettling. After the years of solitude following my husband's passing during the pandemic, each social encounter carries more weight. Even the thought of greeting someone at the entrance makes my heart flutter like it did decades ago when I first moved here with him. I spent the morning preparing for the event in my small kitchen, making a checklist of items to bring: a notebook, a pen, my favorite scarf, and perhaps a few homemade treats for neighbors. Each item reminded me of days past, of the times my husband and I would meticulously plan for such gatherings. I remember him teasing me about overpacking, about the ridiculous amount of homemade cookies I insisted on bringing. And yet, it was these small rituals, these seemingly trivial preparations, that wove together our shared joys and gave us a sense of belonging. Now, preparing alone, I feel both the absence and the enduring presence of our shared life. Looking at the calendar, I thought about how communities evolve. This led my mind, as it often does, to the story of Ohio's statehood. On March 1, 1803, Ohio became the 17th state of the United States, a moment that marked the beginning of countless community gatherings, town halls, and shared celebrations. It is remarkable how events like statehood ripple through time, shaping neighborhoods, influencing migrations, and laying down the very foundations that let a simple community day take place centuries later. I often reflect on these historical layers when I organize my thoughts for daily life. It reminds me that each interaction, no matter how ordinary, is part of a continuum stretching back through generations. While sipping my tea, I allowed myself a small, quiet chuckle. Even though my days are often solitary now, I am not entirely alone. The stories of my neighborhood, the memories of shared laughter with my late husband, and the echoes of history that I carry with me, form a kind of companionable chorus. They reassure me that solitude need not always be loneliness. It can also be a space to connect more deeply with the past, to anticipate moments of joy yet to come, and to prepare my heart for the community day that awaits. The morning of the community day began with a quiet ritual of its own. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft lavender blouse that reminded me of my husband's favorite tie. As I smoothed the fabric over my shoulders, I caught my reflection in the mirror. And for a brief moment, I saw not only the 70-year-old widow I have become, but also glimpses of the young teacher who once led history classes with boundless energy. Preparing for the day, I wrote down the small things I wanted to remember to take: a notebook for observations, a pen, a few photographs of the neighborhood from years past, and some modest homemade treats. Each item was a thread, connecting the present to the past, weaving comfort into the anxious flutter of anticipation that danced in my chest. While arranging my belongings, memories flooded back. I recalled those early days of attending festivals with my husband, when the air seemed lighter, laughter more abundant. We would stroll past stalls of fresh produce, homemade crafts, and children running freely with balloons clutched tightly in their hands. I remembered the warmth of community, the casual greetings exchanged with neighbors, the brief but heartfelt conversations that made even ordinary days feel profound. And now, preparing alone, I was struck by the quiet contrast between then and now. The solitude of my apartment felt heavy at moments, but preparing for this day allowed me to bridge that gap, letting nostalgia and anticipation mingle. In my mind, I wandered back further to the stories I often told my students about the Great Migration, when African American families left the oppressive conditions of the South between 1910 and 1970 to seek opportunities and freedom in northern states like Ohio. I thought about the courage those families needed to start anew, and how the formation of communities in Ohio depended on such movements. Today, the same neighborhood I would soon walk through was shaped by these past migrations. Even as I prepared my small bag of essentials, I imagined the countless hands and hearts that had built the sense of belonging that allowed such a community day to exist at all. The history of the past gave weight to the present, reminding me that each interaction, each smile, each conversation was part of a long story stretching back through generations. By mid-morning, I was ready. I stepped outside, and the familiar sights of my neighborhood greeted me. The streets were calm, bathed in the soft glow of early sunlight. A slight breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from the nearby park, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh bread from the corner bakery. Every detail reminded me of the countless mornings my husband and I had walked these streets, hand in hand, discussing everything from mundane errands to history lessons I would later share with my students. The juxtaposition of memory and the current solitude was poignant, but it also stirred a gentle excitement. This day could become a new memory, a bridge between past and present, solitude and connection. I made my way to the gathering spot, my steps measured but deliberate. The community center was beginning to hum with activity. Tables adorned with colorful cloths, children's laughter weaving through the air, and neighbors exchanging cheerful greetings. I paused for a moment to take it all in, feeling a warmth spread through me. It was not only the familiarity of the place or the friendly faces, but the profound realization that the same community spirit I had cherished for decades persisted. It was alive and waiting for participation, and I was ready to embrace it. Even as I navigated the preparation, I allowed my thoughts to wander to the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, a historic site I often referenced when discussing local history. Once a notorious prison housing some of the most infamous criminals, its walls now stand as a reminder of justice, reform, and the complicated tapestry of human society. Similarly, our neighborhood, with its community events and daily routines, tells a story of human resilience and transformation. Both past and present echo the theme that connection and understanding are cultivated over time, not inherited instantly. These reflections brought a gentle smile to my face as I arrived at the first tables, ready to participate in the day's events, eager to both give and receive, to honor memory while creating something new. The moment I stepped fully into the community day, I was enveloped by a lively tapestry of colors, sounds, and scents. Stalls lined the main pathway, each offering something unique: handmade soaps that smelled of lavender and cedar, jars of honey glistening in the sunlight, baskets of fresh vegetables, and trays of pastries that reminded me of the small kitchen my husband and I had shared. The mingling voices of children, their laughter like chimes in the wind, created a rhythm that was both comforting and invigorating. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply breathe it all in, letting the sensory overload soothe the lingering anxiety of going out alone. It was then that I spotted familiar faces, neighbors I hadn't seen in months, some even in years. I approached Mrs. Klein, a retired librarian whose sharp wit once made history lessons come alive in our local adult education classes. "Eleanor," she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling with recognition. "I didn't think I'd see you here today." We exchanged a warm embrace, and immediately the ice of my solitude melted. Conversation flowed effortlessly as we reminisced about past community gatherings, the old oak tree that used to stand near the corner of the park, and our shared love for local history. Each anecdote seemed to ripple outward, connecting me not only to Mrs. Klein, but to the countless lives intertwined with mine over decades. As we chatted, I reflected on the significance of these encounters. I thought about the Great Migration, when families from the South arrived in Ohio seeking opportunity and community. Many of those families, like my neighbors, had to navigate unfamiliar territory and forge connections from scratch. Often amid social and economic hardship, the parallels between their courage and the courage required to step out of my apartment after months of quiet isolation struck me with a gentle clarity. In both cases, human connection had the power to transform uncertainty into belonging. It was astonishing how history and present intersected in these everyday moments. I wandered further into the event, drawn toward a group gathered around a small stage where local performers were singing folk songs. The melodies reminded me of the songs my husband and I used to hum while gardening in the backyard, simple tunes with complex layers of emotion. Watching the performers, I realized that participation, even in the smallest ways, was a celebration of continuity. Just as Ohio had grown from a frontier state to a hub of diverse communities, each person present contributed to the living history of our neighborhood. Observing children dance around, some timid, some bold, I felt a sense of hope. These young faces, unaware of the weight of history, were already part of it through these communal experiences. Then, an unexpected encounter caught my attention. A small group of local students were huddled together, eyes wide with curiosity as they discussed a project on Ohio history. I approached them gently, offering a soft, "May I join you?" They smiled and nodded, inviting me into their circle. Their questions ranged from the founding of Ohio in 1803 to the role of women in early civic life. I shared stories of suffragists in Ohio, women who fought tirelessly for the right to vote, drawing parallels between their struggles and the determination of students pursuing knowledge today. Their enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me why I had devoted so much of my life to teaching. As I spoke, I noticed the subtle reactions in the children's expressions. Furrowed brows, sparks of recognition, and sudden smiles as they connected historical narratives to their own lives. I remembered teaching about the Ohio State Reformatory and its stories of reform, punishment, and redemption, and I wove these narratives into our conversation. History, I told them softly, is not just about dates and events. It's about people, choices, and the courage to create change. They listened intently, and I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. In guiding them, even briefly, I was continuing the lineage of storytelling, passing on not only facts but the values and empathy embedded in them. Walking past the food stalls, I paused to sample a piece of fresh apple pie. Its sweet aroma carried me back to another memory, my husband and I sharing desserts at a church bake sale decades ago, laughter punctuating the quiet hum of community chatter. Each bite, each conversation, each smile served as a gentle reminder that loneliness could be bridged by these small yet meaningful interactions. The day was unfolding like a tapestry, each thread a blend of past and present, history and personal memory. By mid-afternoon, I felt a quiet, steady joy. The nervous tension from the morning had dissolved, replaced by the soft glow of inclusion. I walked through the rows of stalls again, this time greeting acquaintances I hadn't yet met, sharing small pieces of advice, or simply offering a nod and a smile. It was remarkable, I thought, how human connection, no matter how small, echoed the enduring legacies of our shared past. Just as Ohio's history was built upon the courage and effort of countless individuals, our community thrived because of the willingness of people to show up, to care, and to remember one another. Energized by my interactions, I decided to join some of the traditional games being held in the central field. There was a three-legged race for children and adults alike, a ring toss, and a simple tug-of-war that seemed to draw almost everyone's attention. Initially I hesitated, feeling the weight of my age and the ache in my knees from years of gardening and climbing the stairs of my little home. But then I thought of the Ohio women who had marched for suffrage in 1920. Braving ridicule and social pressure just to claim their right to vote. If they could stand in crowded streets and face jeers, surely I could manage a little friendly competition in the open air. I paired up with Mrs. Klein for the three-legged race. We tied our legs together with a bright red ribbon and wobbled toward the starting line, laughter bubbling up from both of us. "I feel like I should be wearing a corset instead of sneakers," I joked, earning a round of giggles from nearby spectators. The whistle blew, and we stumbled forward, half run, half tiptoe, arms linked and hearts lighter with every awkward step. We didn't win, of course, but the exhilaration of movement, of being part of something larger than myself, reminded me of a different kind of courage, the courage to engage fully with life, even after loss. After the race, I wandered over to a quiet corner where a small group was gathered for a historical discussion, led by a local historian. Intrigued, I joined the circle, recognizing an opportunity to share some of my own knowledge. The discussion centered on the Great Migration, when families from the South moved to Ohio seeking work and a better life. I shared stories I had collected over the years. Families who arrived with little more than hope, finding jobs in factories, teaching their children, and gradually shaping the cultural fabric of our cities. One young girl listened intently, her notebook open, jotting down every word. "It's amazing," she said softly, "how much history is right here in our own neighborhood." I smiled, thinking that perhaps she would grow up to treasure these narratives as much as I had. Feeling inspired, I offered a personal anecdote. I told the group about my husband and me attending community festivals and local fairs when we were first married. How the smells of fried dough and roasted corn, the laughter of children, and the quiet conversations with neighbors had formed an invisible web that held us to our community, much like the families who migrated decades earlier. I noticed nods and murmurs of agreement, and I realized that sharing my lived experiences was, in a way, a continuation of history itself. Small, personal acts that reflected larger social truths. Next, I moved to a storytelling booth where volunteers were inviting attendees to share their family histories. I was encouraged to step up, and for a moment, hesitation gripped me. But then I remembered the countless students I had taught, the ones who had faced obstacles but persisted. I began recounting tales of Ohio's historical milestones: the founding of the state in 1803, the struggles of early settlers, and the suffrage movement that empowered women to vote. I likened their struggles and triumphs to the small victories in our daily lives, surviving loss, finding community, and embracing new beginnings. The listeners' eyes glimmered with interest, some even leaning forward, as if leaning into the past itself. During a short break, I wandered to a food stall where the aroma of cinnamon and nutmeg-filled apple pies mingled with roasted corn. I bought a slice, savoring the warmth and sweetness. I recalled the times my husband and I had baked together, laughing over spilled flour and uneven crusts. The memory was bittersweet, but comforting. A gentle reminder that even in absence, love and joy linger. Nearby, a young mother with her toddler waved at me, and I returned the gesture. We exchanged a few words about how events like this help strengthen bonds within the community, and I realized that even a simple smile could echo the impact of history, bridging generations. The afternoon continued with small workshops on local crafts, from pottery to quilting. I decided to participate in a quilting circle, joining hands with women of varying ages. The rhythmic stitching reminded me of the patterns of history itself, each thread interwoven with another, creating a tapestry that told stories of resilience, creativity, and shared humanity. I shared tales of the Ohio State Reformatory, of reforms and the efforts to provide education and rehabilitation to those imprisoned, drawing parallels to how each person in our circle was contributing to the greater good of the community, through patience and skill. The girls next to me listened wide-eyed as I recounted both the triumphs and follies of the past, linking them to lessons we could apply today. By late afternoon, I found myself seated under a large oak tree, watching children play and families mingle. The tug-of-war had ended, races had been run, and the community was winding down. Yet, the energy lingered, a gentle hum of connection. I reflected on the day's experiences, the shared laughter, the earnest questions from young learners, and the quiet moments of recognition and memory. Ohio's history, from its founding to the Great Migration, the suffrage movement, and the complex tales of reformatories, was alive in these streets, not confined to books or classrooms. I felt both humbled and invigorated, aware that even in my later years I could contribute to this ongoing narrative, nurturing knowledge and empathy in those around me. The day moved on, and I made my way toward a small group of students gathered near the old bandstand. They were part of a local history project, keen on documenting the stories of their town, and I saw a chance to connect with a younger generation in a meaningful way. The sight of their eager faces reminded me of my own classroom days, when I would watch wide-eyed students scribble notes in notebooks, their pencils dancing across the pages as they tried to capture the past. Now, decades later, I could pass on more than just dates and names. I could share lived experience, the texture of life interwoven with history. I approached the group and introduced myself. "Hello, I'm Eleanor," I said, offering a smile that I hoped conveyed warmth and trust. They greeted me back, a little shy at first, but soon one boy, maybe 14, asked, "Did people really travel all the way from the South to Ohio during the Great Migration? That must have been so hard." I nodded, and a rush of memories filled me. I told them about families who left everything behind, often with just a suitcase in hand, in search of work, education, and the promise of a better life. I described the hardships they endured on the trains and in the bustling cities of the North, and how they worked tirelessly to build communities that would sustain generations. The children listened in rapt attention, their eyes wide, occasionally exchanging glances that seemed to say, "I can't imagine this, but I understand it matters." One girl asked me if I had any family who went through the Great Migration. I smiled wistfully, thinking about my own parents, who had shared their stories of resilience and hope. "Not directly," I replied, "but I've spent a lifetime collecting stories of those who did. Every tale, every hardship, every triumph. It adds to the richness of our community." I could see their young minds connecting dots between the past and the present, and it warmed me more than I could have anticipated. I shared with them the importance of perseverance and the courage to seek change, linking it to their current lives. "History isn't just dates in a book," I told them. "It's the accumulation of choices, struggles, and dreams. And just as the people of Ohio shaped their world, you have the power to shape yours. Learn, question, and contribute. Your stories matter too." One of the students scribbled furiously in a notebook and another whispered, "This is amazing. I never thought history could feel alive like this." I chuckled softly, reminded of the spark that always kindled in students when they discovered relevance in the past. After spending some time answering questions, I noticed a young mother sitting nearby with her child in a stroller. She seemed tired, her eyes carrying the weight of responsibility, yet she smiled politely as I waved. A little later, I struck up a conversation with her. She spoke of balancing work, childcare, and the constant effort to give her son a sense of stability and joy. Her words resonated deeply with me, recalling my own struggles as a young mother and later, the loneliness that came after my husband's passing. I shared small pieces of advice, encouraging her to savor the fleeting moments of laughter and love, just as I had learned to do over the years. The mother listened intently, and for a moment, it felt as if we were two generations connected by shared understanding. I told her stories of other women in Ohio who had faced immense challenges, from raising families alone during economic hardships, to advocating for education and civil rights. The connection between our personal struggles and the larger tapestry of history became evident, and I could see her shoulders relax, even if only slightly. It was a reminder that empathy and shared stories could bridge loneliness, even amidst the bustle of a community festival. As the afternoon waned, I continued to engage with the students, answering more questions about historical milestones, how Ohio contributed to the Union during the Civil War, the establishment of local schools, and the role women played in shaping civic life. I drew parallels between these events and the lives of the festival goers around us, emphasizing that history isn't separate from daily life. It is intertwined with every smile, every struggle, every celebration. The children's eyes shone with curiosity, and I felt a profound sense of purpose. Teaching never truly ends, it merely finds new audiences and fresh faces eager to learn. Before leaving the bandstand area, I watched as one boy carefully documented the stories I had shared, while a girl sketched a small illustration of a train representing the Great Migration. Their efforts reminded me of the power of connection. How knowledge passed from one generation to another ensures that history is preserved, valued, and integrated into the fabric of daily life. It also reminded me of my own journey, the days of isolation, the moments of grief, and the way community could heal, nurture, and inspire. I left the students and wandered toward a quiet bench under the shade of a maple tree. The hum of conversation, the laughter of children, and the aromas from nearby food stalls created a comforting mosaic of sounds and scents, I thought about how far we've come as a community and as a nation, from the struggles of migrants seeking opportunity, to the efforts of ordinary citizens to educate, uplift, and connect. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not only for being part of today's festival, but for the chance to witness and contribute to the ongoing story of Ohio and its people. Later in the afternoon, I found myself drawn to a quieter corner of the festival, where a small circle had formed around a storytelling session. The voice of the presenter mingled with the occasional chirp of birds and the faint scent of roasted corn from a nearby stall. As I listened, I noticed a young mother sitting nearby with her little boy, who fidgeted with a toy truck, clearly restless yet curious. Something in her eyes, tired, wary, yet tender, caught my attention. I could relate. I have lived through that delicate balance between exhaustion and devotion, between the relentless demands of daily life and the need to find moments of connection. Her story began with the simple truth of survival, raising her son alone while juggling work and household responsibilities. She spoke softly, almost apologetically, yet each word carried weight and resilience. I approached her slowly, careful not to intrude, and introduced myself. "Hello, I'm Eleanor," I said, and she smiled, perhaps relieved to have an empathetic listener. She explained that she was a single mother trying to give her child a better life, often feeling the crushing weight of isolation. I listened intently, nodding as memories of my own solitude after my husband's passing surfaced. The long evenings filled with quiet, the meals shared with only my memories for company, and the subtle ache of wanting companionship, yet finding solace in small routines. I shared my own story in gentle fragments, not to overshadow hers, but to create a bridge of understanding. "Loneliness can be profound," I said, "but it can also be a teacher. It teaches us patience, resilience, and the value of fleeting moments of joy." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and I realized that sometimes the simple act of acknowledgement, of hearing and being heard, is enough to lighten the heart. As we spoke, my mind drifted to a historical connection, as it often does. I recalled the Ohio women's suffrage movement of the early 20th century. The struggles of women demanding the right to vote were not unlike the struggles this young mother faced today. The courage it took for women to stand up against societal norms and fight for their voices to be heard resonated with the courage required to raise a family alone. I shared these reflections, emphasizing how history often mirrors our personal battles, offering lessons and inspiration. "Just as those women persevered," I said, "you too can navigate these challenges, knowing that every small step forward matters." The young mother listened intently, absorbing the historical parallels as if they were lifelines in her current reality. Her son, now sitting quietly, seemed to sense the gravity and warmth of our conversation. I offered practical encouragement too, simple yet meaningful. Advice on community resources, ways to find small pockets of support, and the importance of self-compassion amid the chaos of single parenting. We lingered on the bench for some time, sharing stories and observing the vibrant life of the festival. Children ran past, their laughter weaving through the crowd, while the smell of grilled food and fresh pastries mingled with the soft rustle of leaves. I realized how community festivals, much like history itself, serve as reminders of resilience, continuity, and the bonds that connect us across time. They are living lessons, echoing the triumphs and struggles of those who came before us, much like the women who fought tirelessly for their rights in Ohio a century ago. At one point, the mother asked about my husband and how I managed to endure life alone after his passing. I hesitated, letting the silence stretch before speaking with honesty. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but life teaches you that even in solitude, there is meaning to be found. Moments of connection, the stories we share, and the history we honor, these things sustain us." Her eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, I could see a reflection of her own resilience in mine. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a warm amber glow over the festival, I felt the day's energy shift. The mother gathered her son, thanked me quietly, and walked away, leaving me with a lingering sense of purpose. Witnessing someone embrace hope and courage in the midst of struggle reaffirmed why I continue to share stories, both personal and historical. It's not merely to recount events, but to illuminate the ways in which our lives, past and present, intertwine and strengthen one another. I stayed on the bench for a while longer, letting the festival's lively sounds blend with my thoughts. I reflected on the interplay between personal hardship and historical perseverance. Just as Ohio had been shaped by migrations, suffrage movements, and the tireless efforts of its citizens, so too are our individual lives shaped by our choices, connections, and acts of resilience. In that quiet contemplation, I felt a comforting sense of continuity, an understanding that loneliness can be softened, even healed, through empathy, shared stories, and the presence of others. When I finally rose to leave that corner of the festival, I felt lighter, inspired by the courage of the mother, and reminded of the enduring power of human connection. Each interaction, no matter how brief, is a thread in the fabric of community, a reminder that even amidst solitude, we are never truly alone. As the afternoon waned and the sun began its slow descent behind the trees, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and rose, I wandered toward the festival's central square. The air buzzed with cheerful chatter, the occasional clink of game prizes, and the enticing aroma of kettle corn and fresh-baked pies. I paused for a moment, breathing it all in, letting the sounds and scents wrap around me like a warm shawl. Festivals have a peculiar magic. They remind us of the rhythm of life, the cycles of joy and sorrow, and how communities knit themselves together through shared experiences. I found myself joining a small circle gathered near a performance area, where a local band played folk tunes. Children danced barefoot on the grass, their laughter bright and infectious, while older couples clapped along, smiles illuminating their weathered faces. Amidst the crowd, I recognized faces I hadn't seen in years, neighbors, old friends, and even a few acquaintances whose names had slipped memory. There's a certain thrill in reconnecting, a rush of nostalgia and warmth. I greeted them warmly, our conversations mingling memories with present joys. Each story shared was a thread connecting us to the past, a reminder of the lives we've led and the history we carry in our hearts. I drifted over to a table set up for community discussions and found myself seated among local teenagers and volunteers. They were eager, curious, their questions sharp and probing. "Eleanor," one asked, "what's the oldest story you know about our town?" I chuckled softly, my eyes tracing the sunlight dancing through the leaves, and replied, "Well, did you know Ohio's story as a state began on March 1st, 1803? It became the 17th state of our country, a beacon of growth and possibility." I wove a tapestry of narratives about Ohio's founding, the challenges of early settlers, and the ways their lives shaped the community we inhabit today. Their eyes widened as I spoke, and I felt that familiar spark of connection, the thrill of sharing history, of seeing curiosity ignite young minds. Later, I was drawn to a small memorial tent, honoring local veterans, many of whom had served during the Second World War. The solemnity of the display contrasted with the festival's jovial energy, but I welcomed the moment of reflection. I recounted stories of Ohio's sons and daughters who had left home to fight abroad, some returning, others never to see their families again. Their courage, their sacrifices, felt deeply personal to me. I imagined my own husband, had he been of that generation, marching with unwavering determination across foreign lands. Sharing these stories with the attendees, I sensed that history wasn't merely facts on a page. It was alive, woven into our consciousness through remembrance and storytelling. As the evening light softened, I wandered toward the food stalls, picking up a warm apple cider and a small tart. The flavors were comforting, grounding, a sensory reminder that life's sweetness often coexists with its trials. I noticed a group of teenagers laughing over a game of ring toss nearby, and I couldn't help but smile at their carefree energy. It reminded me of my own childhood, of days spent chasing friends through sunlit streets, feeling invincible yet acutely aware of the fleeting nature of time. Amidst this lively scene, I stumbled upon a volunteer organizing a brief ceremony to commemorate the Great Migration, when countless African American families moved from the South to Ohio in search of opportunity and freedom. The stories of these families resonated deeply, reflecting struggles and triumphs that echo in our own lives. I spoke to the young people gathered, linking the historical migration to the courage we witness daily, the bravery to leave comfort behind, to seek better futures, and to carve out communities despite hardship. My voice softened as I shared anecdotes of families who built schools, businesses, and neighborhoods from nothing, leaving legacies that endure to this day. Their faces glowed with understanding, and I felt the profound satisfaction that comes from witnessing empathy take root across generations. Before leaving the memorial area, I lingered to observe the quiet moments. A mother guiding her child's hand over a plaque, an elderly man adjusting a flag in silent reverence, a group of students scribbling notes eagerly. Each small act was a testament to the enduring power of community, a reminder that even in a world often fractured by isolation, human connections endure, sustained by stories, history, and shared experiences. As twilight descended and lanterns began to glow like scattered stars across the festival grounds, I found myself reflecting on the day. The vibrancy, the laughter, the solemn moments, all intertwined to create a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in months. I realized that while solitude teaches resilience, engagement nourishes the soul. Festivals, historical reflections, and shared stories are more than fleeting events. They are the threads that weave our individual lives into a larger tapestry of human experience. With the evening air cooling and the stars beginning to peek through the indigo sky, I started my walk home. Each step was lighter than before, buoyed by the sense of connection, gratitude, and the realization that community is not just a place, but a living, breathing network of hearts and stories. My mind wandered to the young faces I had encountered, to the mothers, children, and veterans, all of whom carry pieces of history within them. And as I approached my quiet home, the warmth of the day lingered, a gentle reminder that life, in all its complexities, is enriched by the simple yet profound act of coming together. The walk home was quieter than I expected, the festival's laughter and music fading behind me like the remnants of a dream. The evening air carried a gentle chill, nipping at my cheeks and reminding me that autumn was steadily advancing. I pulled my coat tighter and kept my pace slow, savoring the afterglow of the day, the warmth of human connection, the echoes of shared laughter, and the hushed moments of reflection. Even alone, I felt a sense of fullness, a rare and treasured feeling after months of quiet solitude. Passing the old brick houses lining my street, I paused to glance at their windows, each glowing softly with the lives contained within. Families gathered around dinner tables, couples whispering to each other, children scurrying to finish homework before bedtime. It reminded me of days long past when our own home had been filled with similar warmth, when my husband and I would linger over tea while discussing trivial matters that now seemed monumental in memory. The thought made my chest ache slightly, but I breathed deeply, choosing gratitude over sorrow. In solitude, I had learned to hold both, the ache of absence and the comfort of memory, together, like two wings sustaining flight. Once inside, I removed my coat and set my cider mug on the counter. The aroma of cinnamon and apples still lingered, mingling with the faint scent of the firewood I had lit earlier in the hearth. I settled into my favorite armchair, the one by the window, that framed a perfect view of the quiet street below. Pulling my journal from the side pocket of the chair, I began to write. My hand moved carefully, documenting the day's experiences, the games I had played, the conversations shared, the laughter and the tears. Writing had always been my way of solidifying memories, of giving form to fleeting moments, and today's entries carried an extra weight, a gentle reverence for life's interconnectedness. As I wrote, my thoughts wandered naturally to history, as they often do. I recalled the founding of Ohio in 1803, when it became the 17th state of the Union. Early settlers had faced untold challenges: dense forests, unpredictable rivers, and the necessity to forge communities from the wilderness. Their resilience mirrored the quiet fortitude I had witnessed in people throughout the festival. I mused on the cyclical nature of human endeavor. Just as settlers had created bonds and traditions to sustain themselves, we too sustain ourselves through connection, storytelling, and shared experience. My pen paused as I reflected on this, tracing a line across the page like a bridge between past and present. The flicker of candlelight danced across the pages of my journal, and I thought of the mothers and children I had met at the festival. One mother, a single parent struggling to raise her young son, had shared her fears with me. I remembered my own youth, the challenges my parents faced, and the countless small acts of courage that go unnoticed, yet shape the course of a life. I wrote her story into my journal, intertwining it with reflections on Ohio's history of migration and resilience. The Great Migration that brought African American families north in search of opportunity and dignity. The parallels were striking. Courage in the face of uncertainty, determination to forge a better future, and the strength found in community. I lingered over these reflections, occasionally looking up at the darkened street outside. The neighborhood was hushed, save for the occasional bark of a dog or the rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. This quiet, this solitude, felt different now. Less like isolation, more like a space in which to integrate the day's experiences, to consider how the threads of history, community, and personal memory wove together. In many ways, the day had been a reminder that even brief encounters, small gestures, and shared stories contribute to a collective tapestry that outlives any single person. After some time, I set my journal aside and moved to the small kitchen table, where a faint draft caught the edges of an old map of Ohio. I traced the state's borders with my finger, imagining the journeys of early settlers, the families who had migrated in search of freedom and opportunity, the soldiers who had left home to fight in distant wars, and the women who had campaigned tirelessly for the right to vote. Each dot, each line on the map, seemed alive with history, a silent witness to human perseverance and connection. It struck me that my own life, though quieter and smaller in scale, was part of this continuum. My stories, my interactions, and my reflections were small contributions to the vast archive of lived experience, much like the countless unknown lives that had shaped Ohio long before my time. Night deepened and I prepared a simple supper, savoring each bite while allowing my mind to drift across the threads of the day. I thought of the young students I had spoken to, their wide eyes and eager questions, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. In teaching, even in moments as seemingly ordinary as a neighborhood festival, we create ripples, echoes that reach far beyond what we can see. I imagine them carrying forward the lessons of courage, resilience, and community, just as I had carried forward the stories of my husband, my neighbors, and the history that had always been a compass in my life. Finally, I returned to my armchair, a blanket draped over my knees, and gazed at the stars beginning to peek through the dark sky. The quiet comfort of home, the residual joy of community connection, and the weight of history intertwined into a soothing, contemplative warmth. I felt ready to rest, to let the day's experiences settle into memory, knowing that tomorrow would bring new moments, new encounters, and new opportunities to connect, reflect, and contribute to the tapestry of life. And as I allowed my eyelids to grow heavy, I whispered softly to the night, "The world is vast, history is enduring, and even in solitude, one can feel profoundly, infinitely connected." The morning after the festival, I woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through my lace curtains. The street outside was quiet, a gentle contrast to the lively chaos of the previous day. I sat at my kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, letting the warmth seep through my hands and slowly wake my senses. It was a ritual I cherished, a moment of stillness before the world fully demanded my attention. Yet my mind was alive, replaying the laughter, just the games, and the conversations from yesterday. I smiled softly at the memory of children darting between booths, squealing with delight as they competed in old-fashioned races and ring tosses, unaware that they were also stepping into a living history lesson, crafted through stories. I decided that today would be dedicated to reflection and sharing. Picking up my journal, I began reviewing the notes I had taken during the festival. Names, faces, snippets of conversation, and fleeting impressions all mingled on the pages. Among these notes, the encounter with the young students stood out most vividly. Their enthusiasm for learning, their curiosity about the past, reminded me why I had devoted so much of my life to teaching. I thought of the Great Migration, those families who had moved north, seeking freedom and opportunity in Ohio, how they had faced prejudice, uncertainty, and the daunting task of rebuilding lives in unfamiliar cities. I realized that, much like those families, these children were embarking on their own journey, discovering, questioning, and growing, and I had been fortunate enough to offer a small guidepost along the way. I brewed another cup of tea and carried it to the armchair by the window, where the map of Ohio still lay. Tracing the rivers, cities, and borders, I reflected on the state's role in American history. Ohio had been a crossroads for migration, a battlefield for ideas, and a home to countless ordinary people whose stories, though often unrecorded, shaped the world in profound ways. I thought of the Ohio State Reformatory, standing as a silent witness to justice, crime, and redemption over the decades. Its walls had contained the struggles and follies of so many lives. Much like the walls of my own modest home contain my memories, both joyous and sorrowful. By mid-morning, I felt compelled to reach out to others. Community was not just about shared festivals or events. It was also about staying connected, offering support, and exchanging knowledge. I called a few neighbors, sharing my reflections from the day before, recounting anecdotes from the festival, and inquiring about their well-being. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, mentioned her recent struggles as she adjusted to retirement, her voice tinged with loneliness. I shared with her the lessons I had reflected upon, how history teaches resilience, how personal stories can inspire, and how simple acts of connection, inviting a neighbor for tea, sharing memories, or participating in local events, can transform isolation into community. In the afternoon, I decided to craft a short letter to my local library, suggesting a small exhibition featuring stories of Ohio's women who had contributed to social and political change. Ohio women's suffrage, celebrated 150 years ago, came to mind. A reminder of the tireless work women had undertaken to secure the right to vote, to claim a voice in shaping their communities. I imagined young readers walking past photographs, letters, and personal narratives, perhaps inspired to explore history in ways that felt intimate and personal. I penned my thoughts carefully, weaving in both historical context and personal reflections from yesterday's festival, hoping to convey that history is not only a set of dates, but a living conversation that continues to inform our daily lives. The evening approached quietly, bringing with it the soft chirp of crickets and the occasional distant honk of a car. I brewed a pot of herbal tea, letting the aroma of chamomile fill the kitchen, and carried it back to my armchair. Opening my journal once more, I wrote letters, not for mailing, but for my own reflection, to those I had met, those I had observed, and those whose lives intersected briefly with mine. I wrote about the young student's curiosity, the single mother's perseverance, and the laughter of friends reuniting after years apart. Through writing, I could hold these experiences close, honoring them as both lessons and legacies. Later, as twilight deepened and shadows lengthened across the room, I found myself reflecting on the broader meaning of community. Festivals, conversations, and shared laughter were only part of it. True connection, I realized, required attention, empathy, and the willingness to engage with both joy and struggle. History, too, mirrored this complexity. The Great Migration, the suffrage movement, the stories of Ohio's soldiers, all were reminders that progress and human connection demand effort, courage, and persistence. In my small ways, I had participated in this continuum, offering stories, encouragement, and presence to those around me. As night fully settled, I felt a serene satisfaction. Today had been quieter than yesterday, yet it was equally rich. By reflecting, documenting, and sharing, I had continued to participate in the living history of my community. I set my journal aside and gazed once more at the map of Ohio. The rivers shimmered faintly in the moonlight, and I thought of all the untold stories that still waited for someone to notice, someone to connect them to our present lives. In that quiet moment, I understood that even in solitude we are never truly alone. Our lives, experiences, and reflections ripple outward, touching others in ways we may never see but always endure. The next morning, I woke to the soft gray light of dawn, filtered through a sky heavy with lingering clouds from a passing storm. My little apartment smelled faintly of tea and old paper, a comforting reminder of both yesterday's adventures and the countless stories I had stored within these walls. I made my way to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my slippers, and brewed a pot of tea, allowing the warmth to fill me from the inside out. I could still hear faint echoes of laughter and music from the community festival, though the streets outside were quiet again. It struck me how quickly life can shift from chaos to calm, from connection to solitude, and yet both are essential threads in the fabric of our existence. As I sipped my tea, I reflected on the day ahead. Though the festival had concluded, its lessons and memories lingered. The faces of neighbors, friends, and children flashed across my mind, each carrying a story, a spark of energy, a small reminder of humanity's enduring spirit. The day seemed perfect for continuing my habit of documenting, reflecting, and connecting. I decided to take out my journal and begin writing a longer entry, one that would capture not only the events of the festival, but also my reflections on the importance of community, history, and empathy. I thought about the Great Migration once more, recalling the courage of families who had uprooted their lives to seek opportunity in Ohio. So many had faced immense challenges, discrimination, and uncertainty, yet they pressed forward, determined to create a better future. Their stories reminded me that courage often comes in small, persistent acts. Showing up, sharing a meal, listening to another person's troubles. Just as those families had forged connections in a new land, so too did the festival yesterday offer glimpses of community and belonging for those who might feel isolated. I scribbled these thoughts down, wondering if someday someone would read them and see the echoes of history in our present lives. Mid-morning, I decided to take a slow walk through the neighborhood, hoping to visit a few of the stalls that had participated in the festival. Even though most had been packed away, a few lingering decorations and banners remained, fluttering faintly in the breeze. Mrs. Thompson, my neighbor, was tending her garden and waved cheerfully as I approached. We exchanged stories about the festival, laughter bubbling between us as we recounted humorous mishaps. The way a pie contest had ended in a flurry of flour, or how children had chased each other in a dizzying spiral of excitement. Through these shared memories, I realized how important these small connections are. Even the briefest interactions can hold a profound meaning when viewed through the lens of care and attention. Returning home, I decided to prepare a small letter for the local community center. I wanted to express my gratitude to the organizers, share my reflections on the festival, and encourage continued engagement in activities that fostered learning and connection. I included historical anecdotes, such as Ohio's role in the women's suffrage movement and the many ways ordinary citizens had shaped the state's history. Writing felt almost ceremonial, an act of preserving the past while nurturing the present. It reminded me, once again, of the Ohio State Reformatory, and the way history can linger in structures, objects, and spaces, quietly speaking to those who take the time to notice. In the afternoon, I decided to revisit my favorite part of the festival, the interactions with the young students. I drafted a small set of notes to send to their teacher, recounting their curiosity and engagement, hoping it might inspire further educational projects. I reflected on the importance of passing on knowledge, much like the generations before us had done. The Great Migration families had carried with them not only belongings but stories, traditions, and values, ensuring that their children and communities could thrive in new environments. In small ways, my conversations with these students yesterday were a continuation of that same legacy. By early evening, I settled into my armchair with a cup of chamomile tea, the sky outside painted with the muted colors of dusk. I allowed myself a quiet smile as I watched the neighborhood transition from day to night. The echoes of children's laughter, the soft murmur of neighbors' conversations, and the lingering scent of festival foods all lingered in the air. I realized that even as life moves forward, even as moments fade, the impact of genuine connection remains. Quiet, but enduring. I thought of the Ohio women's suffrage movement, and how every act, no matter how small, contributes to a larger narrative of progress, hope, and belonging. As darkness settled, I began my final reflections for the day, soft and contemplative. I reviewed my journal, rereading the entries, savoring the memories, and feeling gratitude for the simple, profound act of living and observing. History had a way of teaching patience, empathy, and perspective. It reminded me that our daily struggles, joys, and connections are all part of a continuum that links the past to the present and guides us into the future. I penned a final note to myself: cherish every encounter, listen deeply, and seek out moments of understanding and kindness. These small gestures, repeated over time, form the threads of community and memory. Finally, I turned off the lamp beside my chair, the room now dim and cozy. I settled under a soft blanket, closing my eyes and allowing the quiet to envelop me. The stories of the festival, the echoes of history, and the connections I had made throughout the day gently mingled in my mind. I whispered softly to myself, a habit I had developed over years of reflection. Life continues, and so do we, one story at a time. And with that, I drifted into sleep, comforted by the knowledge that even in solitude, we remain part of a larger tapestry, woven together by time, history, and the simple, enduring power of human connection. Final reflection. As the night fully embraces the world, I feel the gentle weight of reflection settling around me. The festival with its laughter, games, and shared stories has passed, but its essence lingers, like the faint echo of a song remembered long after the last note fades. I think of the families who migrated north, seeking new beginnings, the women who fought tirelessly for suffrage, and the countless individuals whose lives shaped Ohio's history. In their courage, I see reflections of our daily acts, showing up, listening, sharing, and caring. Even the smallest gestures ripple outward, leaving marks unseen yet enduring. Life, I have learned, is stitched together from these moments of connection and reflection, threaded with joy and sorrow alike. And so, I close my journal, breathe deeply, and feel gratitude for the stories, both historical and personal, that continued to teach and inspire, soft and restorative, carrying me into dreams filled with the whispers of the past, the laughter of community, and the enduring warmth of human connection. If you enjoy these journeys through time,